So this morning we're going to be tying a form of a pale morning dun PMD nymph. In this case it's going to be a split back. Interesting pattern, actually very effective pattern. Certainly going to add a couple of new techniques to your tying, and this is one of those patterns where you're going to want to be at least somewhat careful as you tie it, in that we've got a lot of stuff going on this one up towards the bead. And so what I've got here in the vise is a size 18. It's extra long. I'm using 18-aught nano silk that has caught the point of my hook a little bit, and so I've got all these strands coming out, but I'm going to be covering them up anyway, so even though it may look a little bit messy to start with, we'll be okay. But we've got a nickel 564 bead on the front. I don't want a bead that's huge, so this is a really good size for this size 18. We're going to start out with and use wood duck not quite a bit, but a bit. We'll use it both for the legs at the end of the pattern, and we'll also be using it for the tail. So I'm going to just grab myself off a hunk of the wood duck here, and as always I'm going to be holding those fibers up perpendicular from the shaft of the feather, which will help make sure I keep those tips in alignment. And once I do have those in alignment, I'm going to pinch them pretty tight like that. Just grab the rest of my feather, and I can just strip those right off. This is going to have a pretty short tail on it. And I always do some adjustments to my tails after I tie them in, but I'm going to go ahead and start with the tail being fairly short, but I'll probably be shortening it a little bit more. Right now I'm just going to take a couple of thread wraps to secure it onto the hook, making sure that it's on the top. I'm going to take a look at those fibers, and they are actually much longer than I anticipated. So there we go. We're going to shorten those down about that much. We'll just go ahead and tie forward. Turn my vise sideways, grab my scissors, and we'll go ahead and clip this balance of wood duck off. And we're going to just travel back down and secure those where the barb of the hook would be, because that's where we're going to want our abdomen to start on this particular pattern. So right now, again, I'm more concerned about bulk up front than I am towards the back. But as I'm tying these tails in, my primary focus is going to be keeping those on the top of the hook shank. So I've got those back sitting about where the barb would be. I mashed the barb down in this particular case. I'm going to use that for ribbing material, and I'm going to tie that in on the lens side of the hook here. We'll just take a few thread wraps back, and we'll draw that material back. What I typically do is each year, and maybe it's just me being overly cautious, or maybe it's my OCD, but each year I'll replace my tippet material, because I just don't want it to age and break off at the least convenient time when I'm out fishing. We're going to be dubbing the body here. I'm using just some hairline chocolate brown for the abdomen here, and I've just got myself a little bit of that out. I'm just going to go ahead and finger dub that right on to my thread. You can see, even though I hit the point a little bit with my thread and it frayed a little bit, at this point it doesn't matter any longer. And we're going to dub this all the way up to just behind the bead. So that means I undershot, and I'm going to be going back and grabbing a little bit more. You can hear me as I'm throwing everything around in here. It's time I clean up my fly shop, I think. I call it my fly shop because it's kind of what it ends up looking like. I don't actually sell anything from here, but I'm going to go ahead and clip that tiny little bit off so it just is out of my way. And we're going to want somewhat of a taper here. Not too worried about having an enormous taper, but you know, we have enough here that we can work on a little bit of a taper. So I'm going to stop right behind the bead here. Then I'm going to just grab my monofilament, my tippet material. And it's going to give us kind of that shine plus a little hint of a rib. We've seen different ways of tying this. I'm sure you could use wire. I've seen folks just dub the thread and create a dubbing loop, twist it up, which makes for a really tight wrap of the dubbing and can make a good looking body as well. But here we're just going to use our monofill. So I got that in place. We'll go ahead and turn my hook sideways a little bit here so I can get access to that and clip it off pretty tight near the bead. From here I'm going to tie in a couple of goose biots. Often black is what I'll use. In this case I'm going to use rusty orange. This is what a biot looks like, a stripped biot. And what I do is I flare them out. Kind of like that, and I'll just pinch 2 of them because I'm going to need one for either side, and these are going to wrap up around some foam to create the split back that we're looking for on this pattern. So I'm going to be tying this with a shiny side of the feather facing inward, and I'm just doing that because when I fold this over to create this wing case, I want the shiny part sticking up. So really I'm just going to take a couple of thread wraps. You can see there I've got that. Maybe I actually may draw that back a little bit because we're going to tie back for our thorax. Not much though, so you can see we've got that one in place. I'll grab the second one that I cut off, and I'm going to do something similar with it, except this time it'll be to the lens side. And usually when I'm tying like these on the lens side, I'll hold it up a little bit higher because I know that thread is going to pull it around towards the lens a little bit. So I'll go ahead and get those both secured in. Then I'm going to draw them back, hold them up against the sides of the fly. And I'm not going to crank down on these. They're not going to go anywhere. But you can certainly cut through them pretty easily. And all I'm doing is kind of tying back to where I'm going to want my thorax to start here. And in this case, we're going to have a little bit longer thorax than usual, maybe about 50% of the pattern. I'm just going to come in now with my scissors and we'll clip off the tiny little ends of these biots. Rusty Spinner. The color we're using here today. So we're sitting here now like that. I'm going to grab my yellow foam. I fought this for a lot of years because I was cheap and didn't really pay that much attention, but I'm using razor foam yellow, and this is a 0.05 or 0.5 millimeter, so it's really thin material. And I'm going to cut myself off. You can see I've already used a little bit of this, but I'm going to cut myself off a strip of this that's going to be about the width of the hook gap itself. So I just basically cut the ends off to make this into more of a point. And once I've got that taken care of, I'm just going to set this gingerly here on top, and I'll take a thread wrap. As long as you catch it with that first thread wrap like that, it's not going to go anywhere. It just sinks right down. So similar to other wing cases that we do, we'll want to make sure that we try to keep this material up, centered on the very top of the hook. I'm just taking that back to about where I want that thorax to begin. And I can pull that a little bit tighter now, and I'm just going to take a few thread wraps backwards and forwards just to kind of hold that into place. At this point, we're going to go ahead and throw in a little bit of extra dubbing for the thorax, and I'm just going to go back to that chocolate brown again. Then I'm just going to take this dubbing, make sure I get a good coverage right back there up against the biots and location of that razor foam. I don't need this too overly chunky here, so I'm going to be okay with that. So now we're back behind the bead. I'm going to reach for my wood duck feather again, and I'm going to grab a clump. So next we're going to be tying in the legs, and we're just going to turn back to this wood duck feather that we used for the tailing. So I'm going to grab myself, you know, about a hook gap length of feathers here, of fibers from the feather. And this is going, the legs here are going to be about the length of the thorax. So I'm just going to lightly pinch and hold those up against the side of the hook while I take a nice ginger wrap here. Careful wrap, I guess I should say. Ginger's a color, so I don't want to get everyone screwed up. And then I'm just going to draw those back until they're right just beyond the thorax here, which will be right about there. And I'll go ahead and take a wrap on either side. And from there you can kind of get an idea of, there's just almost just a hint of legs here. I'm going to clip these off. Certainly you could tie both sets in and clip them off, but since I tend to pull on the ends to size them, if I leave both of them in place, sometimes I lose track of which is which and end up shortening the wrong side. So I've got those. I know I'm going to be drawing them back, but I'm going to try to get them fairly close. I also know that when I tie with my thread here, it's going to want to pull those feathers around towards the lens, so I'll hold them up a little bit higher towards the top of the hook, knowing that they're going to spin around on me a little bit. And so I've got those in position. Now I'm just going to draw those back so that they're the same length as what I've got on the other side. Then I'll take some wraps to secure that as well, just to make sure I don't lose track of that. Come back in with my scissors and we'll go ahead and clip off the balance of these wood duck fibers. Like that. So this is how we're looking now. You can see some very short legs. Not really short, but you know, just about the length of the body. From here we're going to go ahead and take our razor foam, and I'm going to fold that up and over the top, and that's actually going to help those legs splay out a little bit more as well. And take a wrap over the top of it right behind the bead, pull it a little bit tight, just like that, and then I'll pull the material back, make sure I get a couple of thread wraps off of the razor foam. Stuff is pretty stretchy, so you can kind of give it a little bit of a tug when you cut it off, and then it'll just help it kind of suck back down and not leave quite as much of a footprint. So now we've got something that's looking more like that. From here we're going to take our turkey or our biots one at a time, and I'm going to bring it up around. This one is the one that's closest towards me, and I'm going to kind of cross that over the top. I'm going to hold that in place with my thumb, and I'm going to take a thread wrap here to secure that into place. So you can see that like that. So now we're going to take the other biot that's a little bit closer to the lens here, and I'm going to kind of try to hold that in place a little bit with my finger while I get a thread wrap or two in here. And I'll just pull those back just a little bit so I can get a thread wrap underneath of them. With that, I can come in with my scissors and just clip the balance of each of those biots off. And what you're left with is a nice wing case with a yellow hot spot in the middle. That's why it's called a split case. And then it's a split case pale morning done PMD. We'll go ahead and tidy up a little bit with a few thread wraps over the top of the butt ends of those biots. And then I'm just going to grab my whip finisher. We'll whip finish this. I'll put a little dab of glue on it, just keep those thread wraps in place. And that's pretty much it. I'll go ahead and cut my thread off now. So there you go. Here's the finished fly. Great nymph pattern. It's a pale morning done PMD nymph. And this one is the split back. Probably tie some up using some black biot as well. This one we use the rusty orange. But give it a shot. It's a really effective pattern.